Want to keep God's Word with you wherever you go? The King James Bible Study KJV app by Salem Media makes it easy to read, study, share, and pray daily with the timeless KJV translation. Enjoy features like offline access, audio Bible listening, smart search, and tools to highlight, bookmark, and take notes, all designed to keep your Bible study simple and organized. Best of all, it's free to download in the Google Play Store. Grow in your faith every day. Search for King James Bible Study KJV and download the app today.
Welcome back to the History of the Papacy podcast, a podcast about the popes of Rome and Christian Church. Prepare yourself to step behind the ropes and leave the official tour of the story of the popes and Christianity. I am your host, Steve Guerra, and I thank you for joining me on this journey. Hey everybody, welcome back. The topic of today's episode is immigration and nativism. Immigration, migration, and nativism have all been constant currents running through the story of the United States from its founding to today. The United States is, in so many ways, a nation of immigrants, with the exception, of course, of the Native American peoples who have lived on this land for thousands of years. Nearly everyone else came here from somewhere else. The history of those native peoples and their relationship with the Catholic Church is a story we'll explore in later episodes. Immigration to the United States has traditionally come in waves, and this was certainly true in the period leading up to the U.S. Civil War. Many Catholics found themselves living within the borders of the very young United States, not because they moved here, but because the borders themselves changed around them. Religiously, all of these different people could be grouped under the broad label of Catholic. Protestants of the time often referred to them as papists or Romanists, but in reality, these Catholics came from a wide range of nations, languages, and cultures. That diversity made it difficult for a single, unified Catholic Church organization and identity to take shape in the early U.S. French, Spanish, Mexican, Irish, and English priests and bishops each struggled to maintain their own independence, sometimes even from one another, and certainly from the established Catholic hierarchy centered in Maryland, home of the original American colonies, and even to a larger degree from the Catholic hierarchy centered in Rome. In this installment of the series, we'll explore the movements of immigration to the United States, the politics that shape them, the internal politics within the Catholic Church among its various ethnic and religious factions, and the reaction of Protestant Americans to the massive influx of newcomers. People they often saw as foreign strangers or even potential enemies from within. Something to always keep in mind is that the Catholic presence in all of these areas was always plagued by the vast distances between where people resided and a local Catholic church was, and the extreme lack of organization and, in particular, the extreme lack of priests. These are all themes that will continue to come up in this entire series. We'll start this story with the French and French Canadians. Very early on, French trappers and explorers spread out from their icy homeland in Quebec. These traders and trappers followed the great system of rivers and lakes that we've talked about so often in previous episodes. Montreal and Quebec City sat right on a major on-ramp to this vast inner waterway, which led deep into the center of the North American continent. Even though the French were geographically much further away from the old Northwest and the interior of the country than, say, the English colonies of the East Coast, they had a tremendous advantage, and that is water access. The East Coast colonists and later Americans had no easy way to cross the Appalachian Mountains. but the French could travel directly into the interior by following the rivers and the lakes. The French also, on and off, controlled New Orleans at the mouth of the Mississippi River, the opposite end of that great water route. This gave them a strategic hold over a huge stretch of land that basically everyone wanted. It's no surprise that many place names along the Mississippi River and throughout the Old Northwest still bear French names to this day. The French presence in these regions wasn't massive. They were never heavy on the ground, but they were there. They often married into local Native American communities, creating cultural and family connections that lasted for generations. And they were largely Catholic. These French Catholics were plagued by the same problem many Catholics were in the U.S. proper: huge stretches of land in between communities, a lack of resources, and a severe lack of priests to serve their small and widely dispersed communities. Now, let's turn to the Spanish and then Mexican claims over the areas that would eventually become part of the United States. The extremely short timeline goes something like this. Spain conquered the heavily populated, rich, and powerful regions of Mexico in the 1520s. From there, Spanish control expanded northward, and fairly quickly they laid claim to vast stretches of land all the way up to the modern Canadian border, and in even some cases beyond that. Over the next 250 years or so, Spain weakened severely from a variety of reasons, fascinating ones that could easily be their own story. Revolutionary movements broke out across Spain's American territories. By 1821, Mexico gained its independence from Spain and took possession of a land area that covered roughly half of the modern continental United States. The Mexican population in these northern areas was relatively low. Catholic missions dotted the landscape, and relations between the Mexican settlers and the Native Americans ranged from pretty good to absolutely terrible, depending on the region. In the 1830s, large numbers of Anglo-Americans began to move into Texas as a part of the broader westward drive. Some of these Anglos integrated into local Mexican and Catholic culture. One famous example is James Bowie, the well-known defender of the Alamo and the man associated with that infamous knife, who became Catholic. Others, of course, did not integrate at all. Texan Mexicans, known as Tejanos, fought on both sides during the Texas Revolution. The Mexican national side and the Texian or independence side. The Texian forces ultimately prevailed at the Battle of San Jacinto in April of 1836. This was a major turning point, carving out a significant portion of Mexico's northern territory. Many Tejano families, as well as everyday Tejanos, remained in Texas and continued to practice their Catholic faith. Some of the remains of the Alamo defenders may even be interred in a Catholic cathedral in San Antonio. Texas remained an independent nation until 1845, when it became a U.S. state. During this period, the borders between Texas, the United States, and Mexico were fluid. Tensions between the United States and Mexico escalated quickly from warm to white hot. Meanwhile, many Germans fleeing upheaval in their home states arrived in Texas. Not all were Catholic, but many were. The U.S. military eventually moved troops into the disputed territory in southern Texas, claimed by both Mexico and the United States. This sparked the Mexican-American War. The war went badly for Mexico. U.S. forces captured Mexico City and several other key cities. By 1848, the war was over and Mexico was decisively defeated. At that point, the U.S. could have annexed all of Mexico. It didn't for several reasons: the extreme cost of occupation, the large and hostile population in central Mexico, and political pushback within the United States, especially from anti-slavery factions tied to the aftermath, of course, of the Great Awakenings. In the reality, the U.S. really only wanted California and the territory between California and the Louisiana Purchase. That land was sparsely populated. Under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, the U.S. acquired this territory, more or less everything that makes up its modern continental borders, excluding the Oregon Territory. The price was $15 million. A bit later, the U.S. bought another small piece of land along the border in what became known as the Gadsden Purchase. The result was that the Mexicans living in the newly conquered and purchased lands had a choice, stay or leave. Those that stayed, around 100,000 people, were granted citizenship through something referred to as being white by treaty, quote unquote. Their lives as new U.S. citizens was not easy. They faced heavy discrimination. Some groups were able to integrate more fully depending on their social and economic standing. Native American and mestizo population, people of mixed Mexican and Native ancestry, often faced the harshest discrimination. Mexican territories had more organization and development as far as the church hierarchy goes than the French areas we discussed earlier, but they share those same similar problems: low population density and highly dispersed communities. We'll move on and begin to discuss immigration in just a moment. Before we do, though, it's worth pausing on one individual who embodied both immigration and the expansion of the United States into these traditionally Catholic areas of North America. A man who might be seen as a hero, or perhaps a villain, or perhaps both. Someone who represented that quintessential American drive to just keep pushing westward. A man both escaping the reach of law and order and at the same time extending a new kind of order. The famous or infamous James Bowie of the Alamo. A big personality with an even bigger knife. Hey, Steve here. If you're enjoying the History of the Papacy podcast, consider joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/History of the Papacy. We're working toward going completely listener funded, which means no more ads ever. When you join, you get early access to episodes, monthly book giveaways, and most importantly, your name is added to the History of the Papacy Diptychs, our own list of commemorated supporters. You can become an Antioch level supporter for just $3 per month, but it makes a huge difference to making the History of the Papacy ad-free and independent. Nobody likes ads, not you, not me, and I'm the guy who records them. So let's just get rid of them. Visit patreon.com/History of the Papacy and join today.
This Christmas, give more than just a gift. Give encouragement, inspiration, and joy. In the Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide, you'll discover a curated collection of meaningful books and devotionals that celebrate faith, family, and the real reason for the season. This Christmas, we invite you to share comfort, quiet, or excitement with each person on your gift list. From beautifully illustrated Bibles and devotionals to novels and picture books, this guide holds the perfect book for every reader, including yourself. So stuff those stories into stockings, wrap collections with care, tuck a book or two into your own nightstand, and join us in celebrating the wonder of reading this Christmas. Explore the Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide and find something special for everyone on your list. Visit crosswalk.com/gift guide today.
Bowie was born in southern Kentucky in 1796, not far from Bardstown, the future site of the first Catholic Diocese of Kentucky, officially established in 1808. His family moved often, chasing the frontier as so many families did at that time. By 1801, they settled in what is now Louisiana, then part of the Spanish Empire. The Bowie family declared allegiance to Spain, which may have required at least a nominal or notional conversion to Catholicism. Spanish law at the time did require this, though how strictly it was enforced seemed to have varied. Louisiana already had a large Catholic population with an organizational structure centered in New Orleans, though Catholic clergy were sparse in the more remote regions. Whether the Bowies became nominally Catholic or not is hard to say for certain. Bowie's early life was marked by land schemes and speculative ventures, many of them tied to the trade of enslaved people. The frontier was rough, and Bowie's reputation was built as much on violence as it was on business. A key turning point came during a conflict with a local sheriff. After a business disagreement, the sheriff shot Bowie. For protection, Bowie's brother gave him a massive butcher's knife. Later, both men, Bowie and the sheriff, found themselves at a duel between two other parties. The duel broke down into a general melee. The sheriff shot Bowie in the chest, and despite multiple gunshots and stab wounds, Bowie chased him down and killed him with that same knife. The fight became known as the Sandbar Fight. The knife, later called the Bowie knife, and the stories surrounding it became famous throughout the region. A legend was born. At some point afterward, Bowie made his way to Texas. He may have participated in early filibustering expeditions, essentially land piracy aimed at taking Spanish-Mexican territory. These were brutal affairs, often unsuccessful, but they fit the pattern of men pushing the frontier through violence and ambition. Cormac McCarthy actually wrote one of his famous books, Blood Meridian, about these filibustering expeditions. Not exactly this one, but kind of in the same general time period. By 1830, Bowie was definitely in Texas. He swore allegiance to Mexico, which allowed Anglo settlers to acquire land. Mexican citizens could purchase 11 league grants, each about 4,400 acres, for relatively little money. Bowie accumulated as many as 16 of these grants, amassing control of an enormous amount of land. In 1831, Bowie's story intersected more directly with our subject. He married into a wealthy and well-connected family, the De Veramendi family of San Antonio. In order to do so, he converted to Catholicism and learned Spanish. Bowie was well on his way to becoming an important figure in Mexican Texan society. But that future unraveled quickly. In 1833, his wife Ursula and much of her family died in a cholera epidemic. Bowie, away at the time, fell ill himself. Meanwhile, the political situation in Mexico deteriorated significantly. Tensions grew between the Texians, Anglo settlers, and the Tejanos as Mexico City attempted to impose new reforms. These tensions led directly to the Texan Revolution. Bowie's story ended at the Alamo. He led a militia contingent there, but fell ill early in the siege and remained bedridden. He was killed during the storming of the fortress, almost certainly in his sickbed. Maybe, just maybe, with that famous knife in his hand. This little detour into James Bowie's story shows just how complicated the religious landscape was during the expansion of the United States. Converting to Catholicism could be driven by faith, but politics, land, and wealth were also powerful motivators as well. So now that we've covered how the United States acquired so much of its territory and how many largely Catholic populations were drawn into the country through these conquests, it's worthy to repeat just how vast the territory was and how relatively few people lived across it. Immigration, movement of people from outside the United States into it, was about to change that whole dynamic dramatically. From the late 1700s through the mid-1800s, almost all foreign immigration came from Britain, Ireland, and the German states. During this period, Catholic immigration grew from a trickle to a tsunami, and there were several reasons for this shift that we will explore. Out on the West Coast, especially in California, Chinese immigration surged after 1850. Because Christianity and particularly Catholicism was not widely spread in China, these immigrants were not Catholic and won't play a major role in our story. I do eventually plan on producing a series on the spread of Christianity to China during the medieval period, but that's a different story for a different day. With the rise of immigration, our focus shifts from the wild frontier of the West to the equally wild ports and cities of the East Coast. In the rest of this episode, we will look at how the U.S. government handled immigration up to the Civil War. There weren't many policies, but the ones that existed mattered, and why so many people were leaving Europe for the United States in the first place is an important topic to discuss. Before diving into details, it's worth noting why Italian and Southern European immigration did not become a major factor until later in the 19th century and into the early 20th century. Despite facing pressures similar to those in Northern Europe, Italy's push factors for immigration and migration were the key difference, not U.S. immigration law. I explored that topic in the End of an Era series if you're interested in more background on that. As for the pull factors drawing people in, modern U.S. immigration law is famously complex and bureaucratic, but before the late 1800s, it really wasn't. The United States was widely viewed as a land of opportunity in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. The streets may not have been literally paved with gold, but it was a place where a person could potentially acquire land, find new economic possibilities, or escape conditions in Europe that were far worse. There were economic booms and busts, unstable currency, and early consolidation of land and wealth into the hands of a few. The beginnings of the Industrial Revolution were transforming life for better and for worse. Yet, compared to Europe, the United States appeared relatively peaceful. There were conflicts in the cities, the War of 1812 with Great Britain, war with Mexico, ongoing disputes with Britain over boundaries, religious tensions, and continuing conflicts with Native Americans on the frontier. Still, for most Northern European immigrants, these issues looked like growing pains rather than signs of deep systemic crisis. Although this overview is skimming past the severe injustices faced by Native Americans and other marginalized groups, the outlook for immigrants from Northern Europe seemed far brighter in America than at home. Before 1882, the United States had only 3 laws addressing immigration and citizenship, along with a few implications drawn from the Constitution. The Constitution itself only hinted at citizenship by defining who could become president, a quote-unquote natural-born citizen. That term referred to people born in the former British colonies that became the United States, or born within the United States after the Constitution was adopted. This clause sparked one of America's earliest quote-unquote birther controversies over whether President Chester A. Arthur, born in 1829, was actually born in Vermont or across the border in Canada. His family frequently crossed the border, which remained quite porous well into the 20th century until the restrictions that followed the events of September 11th, 2001. The Naturalization Act of 1790 was the first major law governing citizenship, modeled after Britain's Plantation Act of 1740. It required applicants to be free white persons residing in the United States for 2 years, that they had to be of good moral character, renounce any foreign allegiances, and swear an oath before a court. Minor children of the applicant would be considered natural-born citizens, even if born abroad. It was, by modern standards, very simple. The Naturalization Act of 1795 replaced the earlier law but added a few changes. The residency requirement increased to 5 years, Applicants had to declare their intent before applying. If they had noble titles, they had to be renounced, something that may remind listeners of the very first episode in this series on Philip Ludwell and his grandson. This oath also expanded to include allegiance to the Constitution. Interestingly enough, I had to sign a teaching contract once that required me to swear an oath to the Constitution. It struck me as odd, but also kind of strangely appealing. It was kind of cool. Anyway, the Naturalization Act of 1798 made the process a bit more cumbersome. Residency requirements increased to 14 years. The waiting period between declaring intent and becoming a citizen was lengthened, and there was more paperwork, oversight, and enforcement. Still, even with these changes, the process remained straightforward compared to today. And importantly, these laws dealt with citizenship, not immigration. There were no visas, no quotas, and virtually no restrictions on entering the country. Taken together, these circumstances created a powerful set of pull factors for immigrants from Northern Europe. Legal barriers were minimal, and although the realities of life in America did not always match the expectations people carried with them from across the Atlantic, the country did present genuine economic opportunity. Compared to the unrest, rigid social structures, and worsening conditions in Northern Europe, the United States looked like a promising alternative. From here, we'll turn to some push factors, the reasons why so many people in Ireland, England, Scotland, and the German states felt compelled to leave their homelands for a new life in America. Steve here with a quick word from our sponsors.
This Christmas, give more than just a gift. Give encouragement, inspiration, and joy. In the Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide, you'll discover a curated collection of meaningful books and devotionals that celebrate faith, family, and the real reason for the season. This Christmas, we invite you to share comfort, quiet, or excitement with each person on your gift list. From beautifully illustrated Bibles and devotionals to novels and picture books, this guide holds the perfect book for every reader, including yourself. So stuff those stories into stockings, wrap collections with care, tuck a book or two into your own nightstand, and join us in celebrating the wonder of reading this Christmas. Explore the Crosswalk Holiday Gift Guide and find something special for everyone on your list. Visit crosswalk.com/gift guide today.
The push factors driving Northern Europeans to leave their homelands played an enormous role in reshaping the United States. Among these groups, the Irish experience stands out as one of the most dramatic. Ireland had endured a long and difficult relationship with Britain long before there was a formal Great Britain. Its economy was underdeveloped, in many ways remaining so even into modern times. The first major wave of Irish immigration to North America came from primarily Protestant regions of Ireland, the Scots-Irish or Ulster Irish, who began arriving in significant numbers in the 18th century. After 1815, the pattern shifted, and the majority of new arrivals were Catholic Irish, many of them men leaving in search of opportunity. A little later in our timeline came one of the great defining events in Irish and American history, the Great or Potato Famine of 1845. What happened was a catastrophic failure of a major food crop, made far worse by poor agricultural policies and even poorer land management by English landlords. Most Irish people were tenant farmers living at subsistence levels. Their diet depended almost entirely on potatoes, and the island relied on only two main varieties, a classic monoculture situation. When a blight caused by a mold reached Ireland, the climate amplified its effects and the entire harvest failed. The British government attempted relief, but not aggressively or effectively. According to most sources, up to 1 million Irish people died from famine or famine-related diseases. As many as 1.5 million more emigrated to the United States or abroad. During the mid-1840s through the mid-1850s, about 80% of all immigrants arriving in the U.S. came from Ireland. The impact on the island, on Ireland's actual population, was staggering. Ireland had roughly 8 million inhabitants in 1841. Today, the entire island, both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland combined, has only 7 million people. The population from the famine has not come back since then. German immigration followed a different pattern. Germany, as we think of it today, did not exist until 1848. Before that, the region was a patchwork of hundreds of loosely connected principalities, counties, baronies, fiefdoms, and free cities, each with its own rules and identity. Germans had been immigrating to North America since the earliest colonial days. There were Germans in the original Jamestown settlement. German enclaves appeared all over the 13 colonies, many founded by groups seeking religious freedom. Thousands of Hessian soldiers hired by Britain as what we might call or describe today as private military contractors, or less generously mercenaries, chose to remain in the new United States after the Revolutionary War. In the 1790s, large numbers of Germans arrived, especially in Pennsylvania, and this steady flow continued into the 1840s. A massive new wave followed the revolutions of 1848, when political upheaval sent many Germans, Catholics and Protestants alike, across the Atlantic Ocean. For the English, Scottish, and Welsh, the motivations were primarily economic. Changes in farming practices, the consolidation of land, and the lack of available farmland pushed many people to leave the British Isles. The United States offered far more opportunity, especially for lower-class families. Cultural similarities, shared language, religion, and legal traditions made America an obvious destination, though British immigrants did not make the same dramatic splash in the public consciousness as, say, the German and Irish immigration did. Many of these British immigrants also had alternative destinations within the British Empire, so that it wasn't this huge, massive tsunami of immigration. Taken together, these waves of immigration profoundly shaped the early United States. The arrival of massive numbers of Catholics, especially the Irish, changed American culture in areas where they settled in large numbers. The openness of U.S. immigration systems made it relatively easy for the newcomers to arrive, settle, and begin new lives. These early movements laid the groundwork for the even larger immigration waves that would follow, for better and for worse. In this installment of the history of the Catholic Church in the United States from Revolution to Civil War, we trace the movement of people and borders that reshaped the early United States. We looked at how the French, Spanish, and Mexican lands became part of the country and how largely Catholic communities were absorbed into the expanding nation. From there, we followed the massive waves of immigration from Ireland, the German states, and the British Isles, exploring the push and pull factors that sent millions across the Atlantic. We saw how famine, political upheaval, and economic pressures and the promise of opportunity transformed the population of the United States and set the stage for major cultural shifts. In upcoming episodes, we will turn to the cultural changes brought by Catholic immigrants, including the development of public schooling and the social issues that grew out of this era of rapid change. So I hope you join me, and I look forward to seeing you on the next part of our journey through the history of the popes of Rome and the Catholic Church.
The Historical Jesus Podcast is the sweeping saga of the life and times of Galilean Jesus of Nazareth, as well as the faith, religion, and church founded to honor and disseminate his acts and teachings. Join me, Mark Vinette, on this fascinating journey through time, exploring the many great works of Christian theology, literature, architecture, music, and art inspired by the words and deeds of Jesus Christ.
Need a daily spark of hope and direction? Let the Daily Bible app from Salem Media be that spark. This free Android app delivers an uplifting verse each morning, plus reading plans, devotions, and trusted podcasts from leaders like Joyce Meyer and Rick Warren. Prefer to listen instead? The Daily Bible app reads verses, reading plans, and chapters aloud, handy for the headphones moment of your day. Choose from versions like ESV, NIV, KJV, and more, and bookmark favorites to revisit later. Share inspiring messages with loved ones right from the app. Feel God's presence in every notification. Search for Daily Bible app on Google Play and begin your day with hope, purpose, and peace.